My daughter emptied my account before my birthday. I only found out when my card declined at the pharmacy. But I wasn't confused, I was calculating. The shock hit me, sure, but there was no room for tears. No room for rage. Just a quiet kind of hurt that cuts deep, stays with you, and forces you to think. It wasn't the first time I'd been ignored. But this time, something shifted. She had always been the golden child, the one everyone praised. I sacrificed for her children, for their needs. I worked until my back ached, my hands cracked, all to make sure she never wanted for anything. And what did I get in return? A decline at the pharmacy. A transaction wiped out as if I was some stranger who didn't matter. My life, my savings, reduced to nothing. They think they know me, think they know what I'll do, where I'll go from here. They think I'm finished, that I'm too old, too tired, too out of touch to fight back. But they're wrong. I've been quiet too long, let too many things slide because I thought that was the way things were supposed to be. I let them decide my worth, my place, my future. Not anymore. I don't need to scream or shout to make myself heard. I've learned something they'll never understand. The power of silence, the strength of patience. And I don't need to wait long to make things right. I'll let the numbers speak for me. Let the choices I make from here on out show them just how wrong they are. I gave them everything. I worked, I cleaned, I fed them before I fed myself. I remember when they were little, the way their small hands would reach up for me, always needing something, a drink, a snack, a cuddle, a story. It didn't matter that I was tired or that the house needed sweeping or the laundry had piled up. I would stop whatever I was doing to give them what they needed. I worked. I cleaned. I fed them before I fed myself. There was always so much to do, so many things to take care of, to fix, to clean, but I never minded. That's just what a mother does, what a woman does. It was like breathing, it just had to be done. There were nights when I went to bed with aching feet, with a back that screamed in pain, but I never complained. I worked, I cleaned, I fed them before I fed myself. Their laughter used to fill the house, their voices high-pitched with excitement as they ran through the halls. I'd smile at their joy, even when I was exhausted. I'd stop folding the laundry to watch them play, to listen to their stories, their hopes. I wanted to be there for every moment, to catch every word, every laugh. They were my world. I worked. I cleaned. I fed them before I fed myself. I remember their first day of school, the way they clung to me at the door, their little faces filled with fear. I held their hands tight, wiped their tears, told them everything would be okay. I reassured them that it was just the first step to something wonderful. And when I turned around, I saw my own reflection in the window. Tired eyes, hair falling loose, but I kept going. I worked. I cleaned. I fed them before I fed myself. There were birthdays, holidays, and endless days when I would get up early to make sure the house was clean, the meals were cooked, and the children were cared for. I didn't think much about myself, about what I needed, what I wanted. It wasn't about me. It was always about them. It's what mothers do. It's what women do. They give everything. I worked. I cleaned. I fed them before I fed myself. And when they grew up, when they moved away and started their own lives, I thought I had done enough. I thought the sacrifices were worth it, that they would remember the love I poured into them, that they would understand the quiet strength it took to raise them. But I never expected to be forgotten, never expected to be discarded like I was. They don't see the years I spent putting them first. They don't remember the nights I stayed up, waiting for them to come home, worrying when they were late. They don't remember how I would go without so they could have what they needed. It's all just a memory to them, one they've chosen to forget. Now, here I am, still giving, still offering what I have left. But this time, I won't let it be in vain. I'm done being the one who gives until she has nothing left. I'm done with the silence. I've given enough. And maybe, just maybe, they'll understand that when they look at me, when they see what's left of me, what I've built for myself now, They might finally see that I'm worth something more than just being their mother, their caretaker, their servant. But I'm not angry. I'm not bitter. I'm just done. I worked. I cleaned. I fed them before I fed myself. Now, it's my turn. At first, I didn't want to believe it. When my daughter first started to change, I told myself it was just a phase. A hard time, maybe. Something she'd get through. After all, we all go through rough patches, don't we? But the signs were there. Small at first. Little cracks I tried to ignore. At first, it was the phone calls. She'd stop calling as often. Say she was busy with the kids, with work. I told myself she was just tired. She'd been a mother for years. I knew how it could drain you, but it still hurt when she didn't call on my birthday, or when she forgot to ask how I was doing. I didn't want to believe it. I thought, maybe she's just got a lot on her plate. Maybe it's nothing. Then there was the way she spoke to me, like I was a burden. She would always say things like, "You're doing okay, right? I don't have time to come over, but you're managing, right?" I wanted to brush it off, to believe she didn't mean it that way. She was just being practical, but there was a distance in her voice, a coldness. It wasn't like before, not like when we'd sit together, me in the kitchen while she chopped vegetables, and we'd talk about everything under the sun. I worked. I cleaned. I fed them before I fed myself. And now, there was this silence between us. But I still held on to the hope. I thought, maybe it's me. Maybe I'm reading too much into it. I didn't want to believe she could turn on me. She was my daughter. She was my blood. I never thought she'd do something like that. But then, there was the way she would ask about my finances, casually, like it was nothing. "How's the money looking, Mom? Do you have enough for the bills?" At first, I thought nothing of it. But then it kept coming up, more often, in ways that felt too deliberate. It wasn't just the money. It was the subtle comments. The way she started to give me that look, like I was something she had to manage, something she had to keep an eye on. I didn't want to believe it, but I couldn't deny the signs anymore. And when she asked me to put her name on my bank account, I brushed it off. "Just for safety," she said, "so I can help you if anything happens." I told myself it was sensible. It was practical. It was nothing. But deep down, I could feel something gnawing at me, something whispering that it wasn't right. But I pushed it aside. I didn't want to believe it. I couldn't imagine that she would do something so cold, so calculated. Then came the day when I found out my savings had disappeared. I remember the shock, the way the world seemed to freeze for a moment when I saw that balance on the screen, that empty number. I tried to call her, but there was no answer. I left a message, no reply. I tried again, hoping for an explanation. Still nothing. The silence stretched on, thick and heavy. I didn't want to believe it. I thought maybe it was a mistake. Maybe there was some reason, some explanation I hadn't considered. But the more I thought about it, the more the weight of it sank in. My daughter, the one I had given everything for, the one I had worked, cleaned, fed before myself for all those years she had taken it. She had emptied my account and left me with nothing. She knew I'd never ask for help. She knew I would never fight her for what was mine. And maybe that's what hurt the most. She knew I wouldn't fight, but I didn't want to believe it. I kept hoping for something else, something that made sense, something that explained why she would do this to me. I never wanted to think that someone I loved so much could hurt me like this. I thought I raised her better than that. I thought, surely, I had taught her the value of family, of loyalty. But now, I knew better. The signs had been there all along, and I had ignored them. I had refused to see the truth, because I couldn't bear it. But now, I couldn't escape it. And now, the silence between us felt like betrayal. It felt like an old, cold wound I couldn't heal. I didn't want to believe it, but I had no choice but to face it. The woman I'd given everything to, she had taken it all away. They took everything while smiling. They did it so effortlessly, as if I were just an old woman who wouldn't notice. But I noticed. I saw it all, even as they pretended to care. Even as they stood there with those sweet, innocent faces, acting like they were doing something for my own good. The way they looked at me, As if I should be grateful. I never asked for any of this. Not one bit of it. But they took it all anyway. When I saw my bank account drained, I thought maybe it was a mistake. Maybe I didn't understand the numbers right. Maybe there was an error. But then the phone calls stopped coming. The visits grew fewer. They stopped asking about my health, about my life. I was no longer part of their world. I wasn't their mother anymore. I was just an afterthought, a burden to be dealt with when it was convenient. They made sure I was taken care of just enough to make it look good, just enough to say they were doing their duty. But they took everything while smiling. I was put into a home like it was nothing. No discussion, no care, no hesitation. They didn't even think twice about it. It wasn't about me. It wasn't about what I needed or wanted. It was just about making sure they didn't have to deal with me anymore. I was the problem they wanted to sweep under the rug. I had spent years raising them, loving them, giving them everything, and in return, I got nothing but their indifference. The bed wasn't mine. The room wasn't mine. Not even the tears were mine anymore. It was as if everything I had built for myself had been taken from me, piece by piece. I couldn't even cry without feeling like a stranger in my own skin. They made sure of that. They made sure I felt small, invisible, like I didn't matter. They didn't see the years I spent making their lives easier, making sure they never went without. They didn't see the nights I stayed awake worrying about them, wondering if they were okay. They didn't see the sacrifices I made so they could have everything they wanted. It was like I had never been anything but a tool for them to use and discard when they were done. The silence between us was the worst part. The coldness. They had no shame, no remorse. It was as if I had never existed. As if all the years of love and care had been erased in an instant. They didn't care. They didn't even notice how much it hurt. They took everything while smiling, and I had no choice but to stand there and let them. And in the end, I wasn't even angry. I was numb. I had nothing left to give, nothing left to fight for. The pain wasn't loud. It wasn't violent. It was quiet, insidious, and it ate away at me until there was nothing left but a hollow shell. I wanted to scream, to fight back, but I couldn't. Not then. Not in that moment. I was just a figure in their life, someone to be moved aside when it was convenient. I was the empty room, the bed that wasn't mine, the woman whose tears didn't even belong to her anymore. But in that silence, I knew something. I knew this wasn't the end. I knew I was stronger than this, that I wasn't done yet. They had taken everything, but they hadn't broken me. Not yet. They thought they buried me. I was planting something. I wasn't screaming. I wasn't throwing things around or making a scene. I was quiet, silent even. But in that silence, I was working. I was making plans, setting things in motion that they couldn't even begin to imagine. They thought I was finished, that my age and my tired bones meant I didn't have anything left to give. They thought they could push me aside, make decisions for me, take what was mine without consequence. But they didn't understand me. Not really. Not the way they thought they did. You see, I had learned a long time ago that the loudest storms aren't the ones that tear things apart in an instant. No. The most powerful storms are the ones that come quietly, the ones that you don't see coming until the wind's already at your back. That's how I worked. Slowly, carefully, one step at a time. The first thing I did was open an account in my name. I had to do it all under the radar, of course. They couldn't know what I was doing, but I was calculating. I knew what I needed. I had been watching them, paying attention to every little detail, and I made sure I was prepared. The money was gone, yes, but there were other things I could do. I still had something left, something they hadn't taken away yet, my mind. My mind was sharp, clearer than it had been in years. I had spent so much of my life being the caretaker, the one who looked after everything and everyone, that I had forgotten my own power. But I remembered now, I was going to make sure they didn't forget it either. I wasn't going to make a big fuss. I wasn't going to beg or plead. That was never my way. I worked, I cleaned, I fed them before I fed myself. And now, it was time for me. They didn't know it, but the seed had already been planted. They thought they could take everything from me and leave me with nothing. But they were wrong. They had forgotten that I was the one who taught them how to stand tall. I had taught them that nothing comes without sacrifice, and I wasn't about to let them forget that lesson now. The moment I walked into that house, the place they had forced me into, I felt the weight of their indifference pressing down on me, but I didn't flinch. I didn't show the anger I felt. I just kept my head down, kept my thoughts to myself, and watched. I watched the way they looked at me, the way they avoided my eyes when they knew I saw through them. I didn't need to scream. I didn't need to lash out. I knew the game they were playing. I had been playing it for years, even when I didn't realize it. So, I let them think they had won. Let them think they had pushed me out of their lives for good. I wasn't done. I was just getting started. And while they thought I was shrinking, while they thought I was fading away, I was quietly setting my plan into motion. They had underestimated me. They had thought I'd roll over and accept my fate. But I wasn't the woman they thought I was. They didn't know that I had been planning for years, laying the groundwork for a future that didn't depend on them. A future where I could stand on my own, where I could be free from their control. So I waited. I waited, and I watched, and I made my move. And when it came time, when the moment was right, they would see what I had built. They would see that their mistake wasn't just taking what was mine. It was believing that I wouldn't fight back. The storm wasn't loud. It wasn't angry, but it was coming. And when it hit, it would be theirs to feel. I had learned to be patient, to wait for the right moment. And now, that moment was here. I took it all back, quietly. There was no loud confrontation, no shouting or demands. It wasn't needed. The power I was reclaiming wasn't something I needed to announce. It was something I could feel deep in my bones, something I had earned over the years with every sacrifice, every moment spent giving my all. They didn't realize it yet, but I had already won. I had watched and waited, biding my time, and now it was my turn. It was all legal, clean, and strategic. It wasn't about emotion anymore. It wasn't about hurt or betrayal. It was about what I was owed, and I was going to take it, piece by piece. I had all the documents in order, all the proof I needed. Every conversation, every move they made, I had kept track. They thought I was just a quiet old woman, too tired to care. But they hadn't counted on my resolve. They hadn't counted on me being smart. I walked out with a bag of clothes and more power than I'd ever had. It wasn't about the house or the money anymore. It wasn't about what they took from me. It was about what I was taking back for myself. I wasn't leaving with nothing. I wasn't a victim, and I wasn't broken. I was walking away with my dignity, with my independence, and with something far more valuable than anything they had ever given me, my own freedom. The legal system had its own slow, grinding way of working, but I knew how to navigate it. I knew how to make things happen. They thought I had no leverage. They thought I couldn't fight them. But I had something they hadn't considered: years of experience. Years of watching, learning, and waiting for the moment when I could reclaim what was rightfully mine. The first step was simple. I moved my things out of the house. I didn't ask for permission. I didn't plead. I just took what I needed. I walked out with dignity, with quiet power, and left behind the empty promises and the broken relationships. They didn't know what was coming, but they would soon. The next step was a little more complicated, but not by much. I had already started the process of untangling myself from their control. I knew where their weaknesses were, and I wasn't afraid to use them. It was all above board, all legal. But it was also personal. Every form I filed, every piece of evidence I presented, I did with a calm that they couldn't understand. They thought they had already written me off. They thought they had silenced me. But that silence was just the calm before the storm. The hardest part wasn't even the legal battle. The hardest part was looking at the empty house, the house I had once loved, and realizing how much I had given for something that never valued me. They had stripped me of everything I had worked for, and for a while, I let them. But I wasn't going to let them do it any longer. I wasn't going to be the one who silently fades into the background. I wasn't going to let my years of sacrifice be for nothing. I had finally realized that I had given enough. It was time to take back what I had worked for. I knew what they had done, and now they would know what I could do. They had underestimated me, just like they had underestimated everything I had ever been. I wasn't just their mother. I wasn't just the woman who had cleaned and cooked and fed them before I fed myself. I was someone far stronger, far wiser than they had ever given me credit for. And when the dust settled, when the papers were signed and the last words had been spoken, I stood there, looking at everything I had reclaimed. I didn't need their approval. I didn't need their forgiveness. All I needed was my own peace. I had taken back control of my life. I had found my own path. And this time, I was walking it on my own terms. They had taken what they thought I wouldn't fight for, but in the end, I walked away with more than I ever had before. I had taken it all back, quietly, and with a strength that they couldn't understand. I didn't yell. I sold it. They wanted to take everything, to strip me of my dignity, of my peace. But they didn't realize that I wasn't like them. I didn't need to scream or shout to make my point. I didn't need to make a scene to show my power. I knew what they'd done. I knew they thought they could push me aside and take whatever they wanted, but I wasn't going to let them have the last word. They had no idea what was coming. You see, the house, the one they'd pushed me into, the one that was never mine, I didn't need it anymore. It had become a symbol of everything they had done, of everything they thought they could get away with. They wanted it, they wanted everything, and they thought they had the right to it. But they were wrong. I didn't need it. I didn't need any of it. So, I sold it, quietly, without fanfare. I made sure everything was in order, every document signed, every deal struck. I wasn't in any hurry. It wasn't about the money. Not really. It was about sending a message. And when the deal was done, when the papers were signed, I didn't call anyone. I didn't send a text. I just watched as they found out, just like I had, in the most painful way. It wasn't the house that mattered. It was the power. The quiet satisfaction that came with knowing I had done what they never thought I would do. The power to take back what was mine, to stand tall when they thought I was small, to reclaim everything they had stolen from me. They came knocking. I turned off the porch light. They had taken everything from me, and now they wanted something else. They thought I would fall in line, that I would let them walk all over me again, but I had learned something along the way. I had learned the value of silence, of restraint, and of not giving them the satisfaction of seeing me react. I didn't need to yell. I didn't need to explain myself. I had already won. The house was gone, sold to the highest bidder, and they couldn't take it back. They came with their questions, their expectations, thinking they could pressure me into giving up or backing down. But I wasn't the woman they used to know. I wasn't the one who would fold. I had learned the art of quiet revenge. They knocked. They called. They demanded. And I simply waited. I watched them scramble, confused, angry, and desperate. They thought they could push me around, that I would take their cruelty without a word. But I wasn't going to let them have the satisfaction of seeing me broken. I stood there, calm and composed, in the space I had created for myself. I wasn't angry. I wasn't upset. I was just watching. I had everything in place, every piece of the puzzle fitting together. When they came knocking, they found nothing. They found the silence of a woman who had finally taken control of her life. They found a woman who had nothing left to lose. And that was the most dangerous thing of all. I didn't need to say a word. The house, the life they thought they could control, was gone. I had taken it all back, quietly and with purpose. And when they came, hoping to fix what they had broken, I had nothing to say. The light was off, and the door was closed. The message had been delivered. They would never have the power to hurt me again. They thought they had taken everything, but in reality, they had given me the strength to take it all back. And now, they would never be able to take anything from me again. Not my peace, not my power, not my dignity. I had sold it, quietly, but it was worth more than any house, any money, or any material possession they could ever take. What I had was priceless, and I wasn't going to give it away. They called. I didn't pick up. At first, I thought I might. I thought, maybe, if they were sincere, if they realized what they'd done, I could find it in me to forgive them. But as the days passed and the calls kept coming, I found that the anger I thought I would feel just wasn't there anymore. It wasn't that I didn't hurt. I did. The sting of betrayal doesn't just disappear overnight. But there was something else, something more important that had grown inside me. A quiet peace. A peace that I didn't want to disturb. The first few times, I stared at the phone, waiting for my hand to reach for it. The number was familiar. The name was too. My daughter, my flesh and blood. But the words they said weren't hers anymore. The apologies, the regret, they were empty now. They meant nothing to me. Forgiveness isn't owed, and I gave enough already. I had given everything. I had sacrificed my time, my energy, my health, my life to raise them, to give them the best of me. And in return, they took it all and left me with nothing but a cold silence. It wasn't just the money. It wasn't just the house. It was the way they erased me, the way they made me feel like I was invisible, like I had no worth, once I could no longer be of use to them. But now, I had something they couldn't take. My peace. I didn't need to hear their excuses. I didn't need their promises. I had lived long enough to know that words, when spoken out of convenience, don't mean a thing. It was their actions that spoke the truth. And their actions had already told me all I needed to know. They called again, this time with urgency in their voices, desperate, pleading. But it didn't matter anymore. I had made my choice. I had taken back what was mine. I had chosen to walk away from their chaos, their demands, and their disrespect. I had chosen peace, and that was more valuable than any reconciliation they could offer. They thought I would come back. They thought that, with enough apologies, enough promises, I would open the door and let them back into my life. But they didn't understand something. I had already moved on. I had already healed. I had already rebuilt myself into someone stronger, someone wiser, someone who no longer needed their approval or their forgiveness. I didn't need them to make me whole. I was whole on my own. I sat there, looking at the phone, and I felt nothing. No anger, no longing, just a deep sense of calm. I wasn't going to pick up. I wasn't going to listen to what they had to say. It wasn't about punishment. It wasn't about revenge. It was simply about boundaries. It was about choosing myself over the brokenness they had left behind. I had given enough. I had loved enough. I had sacrificed enough. Now, I was taking care of myself. As the calls continued, I never picked up. They would call. I would let it ring. And in that silence, I found peace. I wasn't angry. I wasn't hurt. I was simply done. They had taken what they could from me, and now I was taking back what they had left me with. My peace, my dignity, my strength. They thought I would come running when they needed me, but I wasn't the woman I had been before, the one who gave everything without asking for anything in return. Now, I knew better, and now I chose peace over reconciliation. They called. I didn't pick up, and that was the final choice. The final act of taking back my power. I didn't need to answer. I didn't need to fix anything. I was finally at peace with the way things were. And that was more than enough. Maybe I wasn't the burden after all. For so many years, I believed that my life was about service, about giving, about being there for others even when I had nothing left to give. I was taught to be selfless, to put others first, to keep quiet and just endure. And I did. I kept my head down and worked, cleaned, fed them before I fed myself. I thought that was my place. But now, with the silence settling around me, I can see it all clearly. I can see how the years slipped away, how I let myself fade into the background. All in the name of love, all in the name of family. But they weren't my family anymore. Not in the way I had imagined. The ones who should have loved me most had taken everything, not just the money or the house, but my voice, my worth. For a while, I thought it was me. I thought I was the problem. Maybe I wasn't doing enough. Maybe I wasn't enough. I had given so much of myself, thinking that's what love looked like. I gave until I had nothing left to give. But in the end, it wasn't me. It was them. They took and they took. And when I had nothing more to give, they just walked away. And that was when I realized I wasn't the burden. I never was. I don't know when the change happened, when I started to see myself differently. Maybe it was when I finally walked away from their world, from their expectations, from their control. Maybe it was when I took back what was mine and reclaimed the quiet strength I had buried beneath years of self-sacrifice. But somewhere along the way, I learned to see myself for who I truly am, not the woman who gave everything away, not the one who put others first, but the one who had lived through it all and come out on the other side, still standing. I am not weak. I am not small. I am not invisible. And now, I'm learning to be whole again. I'm learning that peace isn't something I wait for. It's something I create. For the first time in years, I'm not answering to anyone. I'm not chasing after their approval, their love, or their forgiveness. I'm not living in their shadows anymore. I'm living in my own light, on my own terms. The house is quiet now, just the way I like it. I don't wait for anyone to visit. Don't wait for anyone to check in. The door is closed, not in anger, but in quiet protection. The life I've built for myself is simple, but it's mine. I eat when I'm hungry. I sleep when I'm tired. And I do what makes me happy. It's not about revenge. It's not about proving anything to anyone. It's about finally giving myself the care and the love I've always given others, but never thought to give myself. This time, I ate at my table, alone and free. I don't need anyone to sit across from me to fill the space. I don't need anyone to tell me I'm okay. I am okay. I'm better than okay. I am whole. And when I sat down to my meal, when I looked at the empty chair across from me, I realized that it wasn't loneliness. It was freedom. No flowers came. So, I bought my own. It might seem strange to some, but I've learned that sometimes you have to be the one to give yourself the things you need, the things you've been waiting for others to give you. I didn't wait for someone else to remember me, to celebrate me. I remembered myself. I celebrated myself. And as I arranged those flowers, the ones I had chosen myself, I felt a peace that I hadn't known in years. I wasn't forgotten. I wasn't invisible. I was here, and I was enough. Maybe I wasn't the burden after all. I never was. I am the woman who learned to live for herself, who reclaimed everything that was taken from her, and who finally found peace in the silence. And that's more than enough. There are more of us than they know. For years, I thought I was the only one. I thought my pain, my silence, was something I had to bear alone. I thought I was the only one who had given everything, only to be cast aside, forgotten, and pushed aside when I was no longer needed. I believed that my sacrifices were unique, that no one else could possibly understand the weight of what I carried. But I was wrong. There are more of us than they know. More women, more mothers, more grandmothers, who have quietly suffered in silence, who have given everything for their families, their children, their husbands, their homes. We have been the backbone of families, the ones who held everything together, the ones who worked without complaint, who sacrificed our needs for others, who loved until there was nothing left to give. And when we were no longer needed, when we were left behind, we were expected to just fade away, to quietly disappear into the background. But I've learned something over the years. I've learned that we don't fade away. We don't disappear. We rise. I wasn't alone. I was a spark in a field of quiet fires. All around me, there are women like me, strong, resilient, wise women who have learned to stand tall even when the world has tried to knock us down. We are not broken. We are not invisible. We are just waiting for the moment when we can reclaim what was taken from us. And that moment is now. It's here. I've met so many of us along the way, women who have been through the same things I've been through. We all have different stories, but the pain is the same. The sacrifice is the same. The betrayal is the same. And yet, there's something beautiful in all of it. We may have been knocked down, but we have never been out. We have never been forgotten. There is power in our silence, power in our quiet strength. And when we come together, when we share our stories, when we stand together, that's when the world starts to see us for who we truly are. We are the ones who gave without asking, who loved without condition. We are the ones who held our families together, who raised children, who nurtured, who cared. And now, we are the ones who are rising to claim our power, rising to claim our peace, rising to claim our dignity. The world may have tried to silence us, to push us to the side, to make us feel small. But we are not small. We are mighty. I see us everywhere now. I see us in the quiet moments, in the soft gestures, in the strength we carry within us, even when no one else sees it. We are all sparks in a field of quiet fires, burning brightly, fiercely, together. And the world is going to feel our warmth. They can no longer ignore us. We are not alone, and we will not be silenced. There are more of us than they know, and we are rising together. It's time for us to reclaim what is rightfully ours, not just the things we've lost, but our sense of self, our independence, our strength. We've been through too much to let anyone take that from us. There are more of us than they know, and we are ready to stand together. They'll learn my name in the will. I didn't need to tell them how much they had hurt me. I didn't need to raise my voice or confront them. It wasn't about getting their approval or about proving them wrong. It was about making my own choices, standing firm, and leaving a legacy that would be mine and mine alone. For so long, they thought I was just a chapter in their book, a footnote, someone they could push aside when they were done with me. They thought they could erase me, as though my worth was tied to their needs, their lives. But I learned something they never knew. The true measure of a person isn't what others take from you, but what you leave behind. And I'm leaving a legacy one they'll have to reckon with. They thought they'd write me off, but I rewrote the ending. They might look at me and think I'm just an old woman, past her prime, whose best days are behind her. But I know something they don't. I'm not finished yet. I still have things to do, things to say, things to give, and when it's all said and done, they'll know my name. They'll remember me. Not for what I did for them, but for what I did for myself. The house, the money, the inheritance, those things don't matter to me anymore. What matters is the way I reclaimed my life, my dignity, my peace, and that is what I'll leave behind. When I'm gone, they'll see my name on that will. They'll know that everything they thought they took from me is still here, still mine, and they'll have to live with the knowledge that they could have had so much more. They could have had a mother, a daughter, a friend who loved them, who stood by them through it all. But they chose to take instead of give. And that, in the end, will be their regret. I'll leave behind the lessons I learned, the strength I found in silence, in patience, in walking away. The legacy isn't in the money or the possessions. It's in the way you live, in the choices you make. I chose to live for myself, to find peace where others thought there was none. And in that quiet victory, in that decision to reclaim what was always mine, I found a deeper sense of worth than anything they could ever give me. They thought they could walk away from me, that they could take what was mine and leave me with nothing. But what they didn't know is that I had already given them everything I was ever going to give. The rest is mine. The rest is mine to keep. And when the time comes, they'll learn my name in the will. They'll know who I am and what I was worth. Not because of what they took, but because of what I built for myself. Quietly and without apology. They thought they'd write me off. I rewrote the ending. And that ending is mine to tell. It's not theirs. And when my story is finished, they'll know that I lived it on my own terms. That's the legacy I'll leave behind. And that, my dear, is the true gift. They sent flowers. I sent them back. I didn't need their apologies, their gifts, or their empty gestures. They thought that flowers could fix what they'd broken, that a card with some nice words would undo the years of hurt and neglect. But I wasn't fooled. I had spent enough of my life trying to be everything to everyone, trying to make things right when they were already wrong. Now, I wasn't the woman who would fall for their attempts to ease their guilt. I saw through it all. They didn't come to me out of love or concern. They came because they felt they had to. They thought they could show up, send a bouquet, and that would make it all okay. But I knew what they were really doing. They were saving face. They were hoping I'd forgive them, not because they were sorry, but because they didn't want to live with the weight of their actions. They sent white roses. I mailed back thorns. The flowers were pretty, clean, and perfect, just like the image they wanted to project. But I wasn't interested in their image anymore. I wasn't interested in the surface-level apologies. I didn't need their flowers or their polite words. I needed their honesty. I needed them to face the truth of what they'd done to me. And the truth was simple. They had taken from me, used me, and when I was no longer useful, they threw me away. Now, they wanted to play the part of the concerned family, of the loving relatives who had made a mistake and wanted to make it right. But it was too little, too late. They had no idea what it felt like to be truly alone, to be discarded like I was, to have your own flesh and blood walk away from you when you needed them most. And I wasn't going to let them pretend. When the flowers arrived, I didn't cry. I didn't thank them. I didn't feel anything. I just saw it for what it was, a performance. They weren't sorry for what they had done. They were sorry they got caught. They were sorry that they hadn't been able to control me, to push me aside quietly. And I wasn't going to let them off the hook. I wasn't going to pretend it didn't hurt. It did. It always would. But I had learned to protect myself, to let go of the things that didn't serve me anymore. The flowers weren't a gift. They were a way for them to feel better about themselves, to absolve their guilt without truly addressing what they had done. So I sent them back. I didn't need their pity. I didn't need their apologies. And I didn't need their flowers. I needed respect. I needed them to acknowledge the damage they had done. I needed them to stop pretending that everything was fine, that a few white roses could undo years of taking and taking without ever giving back. They wanted to soothe their own consciences, but I wasn't their easy fix anymore. I wasn't the woman who would just accept their gestures without looking deeper. I mailed back thorns because I wanted them to feel the sharpness of what they had done. I wanted them to understand that apologies don't mean anything if they're not backed up by action, if they're not rooted in true remorse. I wanted them to see that their actions had consequences, and they couldn't just erase that with a bouquet or a letter. I wasn't going to fall for their tricks anymore. I wasn't going to let them treat me like I was small or unimportant. I had learned too much to go back to being the woman they could walk all over. So I sent the flowers back, and I felt nothing but a quiet sense of relief. They could keep their gestures. I didn't need them. What I needed was respect. What I needed was to finally be seen for who I was, not a tool to be used, not a woman to be ignored, but someone who had a voice, someone who had power, and someone who was done accepting the scraps they wanted to throw at me. I rented a little cottage and planted tomatoes. It wasn't much, just a small space with a porch that caught the late afternoon sun and a garden that needed tending. But it was mine, and that made all the difference. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was living in someone else's shadow, in a place where I didn't belong. I was where I wanted to be. I woke up to the scent of earth and morning dew, the sound of birds and the wind rustling through the trees. There was no one to tell me how to live, no one to remind me of what I wasn't. Here, I was simply me. I planted tomatoes because I wanted to see something grow. I wanted to nurture something that was mine, something that would remind me that I could still take root, even in a new place, even after everything I had been through. The soil was soft and welcoming, the air fresh and full of possibility. Each day, I spent a little time outside, digging my hands into the earth, feeling the warmth of the sun on my back. It wasn't hard work, not really. It was the kind of work that brought peace, the kind that let your mind wander without rushing it. I watered the plants in the mornings, watched them sprout and stretch toward the sun. I didn't think about the past, about the mistakes or the hurts. I thought about the small pleasures, the way the tomatoes slowly turned red, ripening in the warmth of the summer, the smell of fresh basil in the air, the feeling of satisfaction when I pulled a few leaves from the garden to put into my salad. It was simple, but it was mine, and that was enough. I started to meet people in the village, real people, not family who only called when they needed something, not neighbors who looked at me with pity or expectation. These people saw me for who I was now, not for the woman I had been, not for what I had given up. I was just another face in the crowd, another person who had come to find peace. We greeted each other with nods or small conversations in passing, and it felt easy. They didn't want anything from me, didn't need me to be anything but what I was in that moment. There was no pressure, no false politeness, just real community. I learned their names, and they learned mine. We traded tomatoes for eggs, or fresh herbs for a loaf of bread, and there was a quiet kind of joy in it all. These were people who didn't need to pretend, who didn't need to make up for past mistakes. They simply lived their lives, and I was happy to be a part of it, even if only for a moment. The peace I had been searching for all my life was finally here, in this little cottage, in the soil, in the laughter of new friends who didn't carry the weight of old wounds. I had found my place, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was enough. No one calls me grandma here. They just call me neighbor. I don't need to be anything else. I don't need to be a caregiver or a fixer or the one who always gives. I don't need to explain myself or earn my place. I just am, and that's enough. I have learned that I can take root again, that even after all the years of giving and being forgotten, there is always a chance to grow, to find peace, to bloom. I'm not alone anymore. I have a small, quiet life that is mine, and in that, I found a kind of joy that I never thought possible. In the dirt, in the sun, in the little things, I found freedom. And for the first time in a long time, I feel like I belong. I wrote the truth in pen, not rage. For years, I had kept everything inside. I held it all, quietly, patiently, letting the words twist in my mind, never letting them escape. The silence had become so comfortable, so familiar. But it wasn't peace. It was a prison. I'd spent my life trying to protect others, trying to shield them from my pain. And in doing so, I had buried myself. It was time to change that. I started writing in journals. I didn't know where to begin at first. But as the ink hit the paper, the words flowed out like they had been waiting for years. Each page was a release, a place where I could finally be heard without judgment, without fear. I wrote to myself, to the woman I had been, the one who had given everything to everyone, only to be ignored, used, and forgotten. I wrote about the betrayal, the hurt, the quiet strength that had always been my shield. And in those pages, I found clarity. I realized that the silence I had lived with wasn't strength. It was suppression. I had kept my voice locked away for too long. They took my voice. So I wrote it louder. As I wrote, I began to understand things I had never understood before. I had been carrying the weight of their expectations for so long that I had forgotten what it meant to carry my own. I had spent years trying to make others happy, to be the one they could depend on, to be the caretaker, the one who gave and gave and gave until there was nothing left. And all the while, I had been silent. Silent about my own needs, my own desires, my own truth. But no more. The pen was my tool of liberation. The paper was my witness. I wasn't angry, not in the way I thought I should be. I wasn't furious or looking for vengeance. I simply wanted to speak my truth. I wanted to reclaim my story. And so, I wrote. One evening, I sat down with a letter in front of me. It was addressed to the family who had taken from me, who had pushed me aside when they no longer needed me. I had kept my distance from them for so long, had allowed the silence to stretch between us like a chasm. But in that moment, I realized something. I didn't need to scream at them. I didn't need to raise my voice or demand anything from them. I simply needed to share my truth. I wrote it carefully, thoughtfully, as if I were speaking to the younger version of myself, the woman who had sacrificed everything. I wrote about the love I had given, the sacrifices I had made, and the way they had taken it all, without ever once considering what it cost me. I wrote about the quiet pain, the years of giving without receiving. I wrote about how I had tried to protect them, to protect my family, and how in the end, I had forgotten to protect myself. When I finished the letter, I sat there for a long time. The weight of what I had written was heavy, but it wasn't burdening me anymore. It felt like freedom. I wasn't shouting at them. I wasn't demanding apologies. I was simply telling the truth, the way it had always been. For the first time in my life, I was speaking my truth without shame. I didn't send the letter right away. I needed to let it settle, to let the words sink in. I read it over and over, not with anger, but with understanding. I wasn't asking for them to change. I wasn't asking for them to feel sorry for me. I was simply showing them who I was, who I had always been, and what I had given. A few days later, I made the decision to send it. I copied the letter, and I sent one to them. They would have to read it. They would have to see what I had kept hidden for so long. I wasn't doing it for them. I wasn't doing it to make them feel guilty or ashamed. I was doing it because I needed to. I needed them to know that I had found my voice, and I wasn't going to let them take it from me again. It wasn't about reconciliation. It was about reclaiming my story. It was about showing them that I was not the same woman who had quietly given her life away. I was stronger now. I was whole. The letters I wrote were my healing. They were my reclamation. And I knew that even if they never read them, even if they never acknowledged the words I had shared, I had finally found peace, because I had said it all. And in the saying, I had taken back my life. I had written my story in pen, not rage, and I was no longer silent. I let go without a sound. It wasn't the dramatic kind of ending, not one that people could mark on a calendar or point to as a moment of finality. No, it was quieter than that, subtler. It was a release that happened deep inside me, in the places where I had kept the weight of years of hurt, years of giving, years of holding on when I should have been letting go. There was no grand speech, no accusations, no angry outbursts. I had nothing left to say. They had already heard everything I needed to say. The truth was written, and the rest was silence. So, I chose silence. I chose to stop waiting for them, to stop hoping they'd come around, to stop pretending that things could be fixed when the cracks had already shown themselves too clearly. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even sad. I was just done. The silence felt clean, almost peaceful. It wasn't a rejection. It was a quiet choice. A choice that felt like setting down a heavy stone after carrying it for far too long. I didn't need any more contact. I didn't need their apologies or their attempts at fixing things that couldn't be fixed. I didn't need any more flowers or letters. I didn't need to hear I'm sorry from people who didn't understand the depth of the damage they had done. They didn't understand what they had taken. But that was no longer my concern. It wasn't about them anymore. It was about me, about protecting my peace, about reclaiming the life I had almost lost in the noise of their expectations. I let go without a sound because, in that moment, I realized that I had already been carrying my grief quietly for so long. The grief of not being seen, not being valued, not being understood. But now, I saw myself, and that was enough. You don't need a funeral to bury a bond. I had carried this bond for so many years, thinking that it was unbreakable, that I couldn't let go without it breaking me. But in the end, I realized that some bonds are only as strong as the value you place in them. And I had given too much of myself for too long to something that never truly valued me in return. I didn't need to scream or cry or mourn. The bond had already been buried, quietly, in the small choices I made every day to put myself first, to take care of myself, instead of giving away everything I had left. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary. And when I let go, when I made the choice to finally stop reaching out, to stop expecting, it felt like peace. Not the kind of peace you think you'll feel when you've won something, but the kind of peace you feel when you've stopped fighting for something that was never yours to fight for in the first place. I didn't need to explain it to anyone. I didn't need their approval or their understanding. They would never understand, not really. And that was okay. The only person I needed to answer to was myself. The only person I needed to care for was me. And I had done that. I had healed enough to know that the time had come to walk away from all of it. The noise, the expectation, the hurt, it was all behind me now. And in its place was a quiet space, a clean slate where I could finally breathe, without feeling the weight of what had come before. When the calls stopped, when the letters stopped arriving, I didn't feel empty. I didn't feel abandoned. I felt free. I had let go without a sound, because I had already said everything that needed to be said. The rest was silence. And that silence, in its own way, was the final act of closure. No more trying to fix things that were broken. No more holding on to people who couldn't or wouldn't see my worth. I was walking away with my peace, and I wasn't going to apologize for it. This was my choice, my freedom, and it felt like a new beginning. A beginning where I wasn't tied to anyone's expectations or anyone's idea of who I should be. I had spent my life being what others needed me to be, but now, for the first time in a long time, I was simply me. And that was enough. I let go without a sound, and in doing so, I found the kind of peace I had been searching for all along. They'll speak my name when it's too late. They'll remember me then, when they've lost the chance to make amends, when they've realized that the years they took from me can never be returned. They'll remember me when the silence is louder than their apologies, when the absence of my presence becomes their burden. I don't need their words now. I don't need them to validate my story. I've already claimed my peace, already closed the door they thought would stay open forever. They took from me, and they thought I would remain silent, thought I would accept their neglect. But they didn't know that silence is a kind of power, too. I was the storm they never saw coming, and now, I'm the silence they can't forget.